Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Couple of Nukes. As always, I'm your host, Mr. Whiskey, and I've done a lot of shows on addiction recovery, especially alcoholism. But in all that time, no one has come to me with what our guest today has, a method of recovery that I did a little research into, and I was just honestly shocked that it's not more prevalent based on how it works and what it does, which I'm going to save for our guest to share with us today. But that being said, it's so interesting. I find that as I have done this show, I have come across so many different forms and methods of recovery. Again, we always say, and I always put forward, to each their own. Everyone is different. Some people like the AA style. Some people prefer or need rehab. Some people, I met plenty of people who just quit that day and they were fine. Everyone is different, both physically, emotionally, and mentally. And so today, what I want to do is present another method to all of y'all who are struggling or know someone who is struggling, and you've tried a lot of different things and nothing's working. Well, here is the Sinclair method and some other information and stuff we're going to get into. Ms. Katie Lain, so great to have you here today to present such a topic, like I said, that isn't well known. And I'm sure just from reading from your bio, I know that you also were shocked by that, especially having gone through it. So I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me with Mr. Whiskey and also just for being open to talking about this treatment. It just changed my life starting in 2017 after I struggled with alcohol for 10 years. And when I first learned about it, I was like, no way, like this is too good to be true. There's no way this is a thing. But upon further research and actually going through the treatment myself, it is true and it really is saving lives. And it's been around for over 30 years now, but most people still don't even know that it exists. So, I guess just a little bit of my story. I struggled with drinking basically the entire decade of my 20s. I'm in my late 30s now. And what started as kind of like party drinking, I had a fake ID. And, when I turned 21, just kind of like binge party drinking. That quickly escalated probably within a year to me kind of becoming a daily binge drinker. And at the time, I just thought it was something people my age were supposed to do. And I figured
Mm,
I would kind of outgrow it in the future when I, got older. But to my surprise, a couple years after really drinking a lot, I tried to take a break. I tried to take 7 days off of drinking because I was kind of getting scared. I'm like, I'm drinking a lot. I need to detox my body essentially. And I remember taking that 7 day break, and it was extremely difficult to do. I made it the 7 days, but I genuinely wanted to drink every day. I was fighting an urge to drink every day. I was annoyed that I wasn't drinking. And finally, by day 8, I was just like back at binging again. And I was like, okay, well, this is definitely more than just a phase, I think. And, that kind of led me on a path of years of just, okay, I'm going to quit. And then I'd quit, and then I'd relapse, and then I'd try quitting again, try doing all kinds of different ways to overcome the addiction. And I just couldn't get it figured out. And it seemed like the harder I tried to quit, the worse my drinking became. And I just remember before I learned about the Sinclair Method treatment, which I'm going to talk about today, I was just sitting, I remember at my kitchen table, just feeling kind of defeated that maybe this was something I was just going to have to deal with my whole life, like being an alcoholic. Maybe I would never get this issue under control. I'd had several rock bottoms, thinking, okay, these are the moments that are going to kind of wake me up and cause me to finally quit. And they didn't. And I've heard people say the rock bottom just keeps getting lower. And I think that that is true to some extent. And that's how people can end up dying from something like this. But just kind of like 101 of what the Sinclair method is. So, first of all, it's called the Sinclair method because it's named after the researcher, Dr. David Sinclair, who discovered it back in the 90s. And it's been researched since. It's literally has decades of research behind it. And what this protocol is, it's extremely unique in that it's not an abstinence based protocol. If, the majority, I would say 99.9% of treatments out there for alcohol addiction kind of require abstinence as the first step toward healing or, overcoming the addiction. And with this treatment, you actually start it while you're still drinking and you incorporate in medicine called naltrexone. That's generic, non-addictive, been around for decades, very cheap, been approved by the FDA for alcohol since the 90s as well. You take this medicine before drinking, And what it's doing is essentially helping the brain unlearn alcohol addiction. A real cornerstone of David Sinclair's research is the notion that alcohol addiction is actually a learned behavior inside the brain. And once it's learned, it's very hard to reverse it. That's why you hear like once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic, and one drink is never enough, that kind of thing, which is true to some extent for sure, absolutely, because the brain has changed. But with this treatment, it's just so unique. And I want to dive into it more and answer questions you have. But over time, what happens is the brain has essentially learned an alcohol addiction, and we learn it because alcohol is very, very rewarding for the brain. And what this medicine is doing is it's muting some of the rewarding effects of alcohol. It doesn't make you sick like Antabuse. It doesn't make drinking an unpleasurable experience. It just dampens the reward a bit. And when we repeatedly drink and don't get the same level of huge reward, the brain just starts to become less interested for a lot of people. They're like, yeah, I could drink, but I'd rather like have a coffee or something. And it's a process. It's not like a quick fix. And there's, more to it than just popping a pill. A lot of us have habits and things around drinking, but man, it's life changing when the brain is no longer operating in alcohol addiction and people can think more clearly. They're not craving alcohol. If and when they drink, they have more control. They can stop after a couple drinks. And these are kind of all results that build after someone's been on the treatment for a while.
Yeah, the addiction is a lot of complicated moving parts because we've talked in other episodes about how with the laser acupuncture episode that I hosted, it was, hey, we can get rid of the physical need to drink, the endocrine systems, and endorphin levels. We can take care of that with this laser acupuncture. But at the end of the day, without the physical cravings, if you still crave it mentally and emotionally, if you have unhealed trauma that you're trying to numb, right, your body could no longer be physically craving it, but you're still going to go drink. On the other hand, you could, get over it mentally and emotionally, and you could go to therapy or go to a faith-based practice or whatever it is and still have the physical craving. So it's taking care of all those parts. And I think, like you said, having as much help or as least temptation as possible by numbing that rewarding effect makes it all the more easier. Like you said, there's still a lot going on, but it
Mm-hmm.
makes it easier. Now, you mentioned a different type of medication that I've heard before, though I'm not too familiar with, that makes it worse. I don't remember the name of Ambiduse.
Antabuse.
Yeah, could you
Yeah.
tell, for those of us who aren't familiar, could you kind of explain that? You kind of made a comparison there too. You said it makes alcohol unrewarded, makes it kind of like a bad experience.
Yeah, so a lot of people confuse naltrexone, which is what's used for the Sinclair method. They confuse it with Antabuse. Antabuse is the medication that was like the OG medication for alcohol addiction. And to be honest, I've worked in this field since 2018, and a lot of doctors I work with don't even use Antabuse anymore because they kind of consider it inhumane. But with that said,
Hmm.
I hear from people who are using it and they say it helps them stay sober. So for me, I'm like, if we have 100 different options to offer people, like that's ideal. So people don't
Right.
feel like I hear from people all the time, oh, AA, I keep trying and going back and failing. It's like, well, clearly it's not working for you. Like there are other options, but a lot of people don't know that. But anyway, Antabuse is a medicine that people can get it implanted in them or they can take a medication. And if somebody drinks when they have Antabuse in their system, it makes them physically ill. They're like vomiting. And it can even, I think there's risk of it even causing people to die. I think the risk is low,
Mm.
but it's something that just makes you so physically ill that if you were to drink on it, it would be an awful experience. And I've just heard stories
Yeah.
of people trying to drink on Antabuse or if they have an implant, trying to dig it out of their skin. Because again, the craving is still there. It's not
Right,
addressing the
right.
craving, but they just know it's like this negative reinforcement if they drink on it. Whereas naltrexone is different. It just like some people start the medication naltrexone and they're drinking on it and they're like, I'm not even noticing any difference. Like, is this normal? And everyone responds differently, but the change is subtle enough that it's not for a lot of people super obvious that they even are
Mm.
drinking on a medicine, but the results really build over time because as you said, like the reward center in the brain is not getting the same level of endorphin and dopamine. And so gradually the brain is just unlearning alcohol as that primary reward. So they're two different medications for alcohol addiction, completely different.
Yeah, kind of the opposite. One is just less
Yeah.
rewarding, one is punishment, right?
Yeah.
And so I think, like you said, to each their own. And I do think it's interesting, right, that it's interesting the mind-body relationship where I mean, you would think, oh, I get really sick because of that pill, so I won't drink. But I mean, just alcohol alone has
Hmm.
negative side effects, and your body doesn't say we need to stop this, right? Because you're in charge of your body, and you say, hey, we're gonna drink this whether it hurts me or not, right? Same with drugs. Like there are plenty of people in the end stages of alcoholism and drug abuse who are physically sick. They've lost weight, they are, throwing up, and they still do it because even if it hurts them. So I think that whole punishment system can be effective to a degree. Now, you talk about numbing the reward system. Can you kind of break down the details for us, especially as someone who went through that? What does that mean? Does that mean because a lot of people, like you said, drink. They start drinking socially. And for some people, a lot of young people, especially from my generation and the generation below me, drink because they have a cooler version of themselves, quote, that comes out when they drink, or they're less socially anxious, or they feel more relaxed. Are those some of the kind of reward systems that you're talking about, or how does that feel?
Yeah, and kind of just back to what you were saying about people being like in that end stage and like they're literally sabotaging their health and people are they continue to drink. Like something I want to just respond to that briefly is that for people to know that alcohol addiction is not a logical issue, it's
Yeah,
impacting a part of the brain that makes it more primitive and like this survival need. And so that's why a lot of us who struggle with alcohol will be like, why am I doing this to myself? Why do I keep, drinking in this way even though I'm destroying my health? It's because it's this like primitive survival urge to do it. The logical you doesn't want to do it, but it's this underlying
right,
urge. So just want to say that because some people think, well, if you have a problem with alcohol, just quit drinking. And that seems like the logical, safe thing to do, but
right.
it's just not that easy once the brain has changed. But yeah, so when naltrexone is dampening the reward when somebody drinks on it. So as we drink and kind of viewing it as a learned behavior, we are learning to associate alcohol to all of these different life events and circumstances. For example, I myself was a daily drinker, binge drinking on the weekends, but usually during the week, I couldn't stop or start drinking until after 5 p.m. So my brain kind of learned really to enhance the craving for alcohol at 5 p.m. because that's when it was anticipating the reward. And then on the
Yeah.
weekends, I would start at 11 a.m. So I would like wake up just like ready to start drinking because that is kind of what I taught my brain. I work
Mm,
with other people who drink once or twice a week or once or twice a month. They're fine the other time, but when they drink, man, it's a bender and they go overboard. And then there's people who drink in response to stress, to anxiety, to celebrate. And everyone has a very unique relationship with alcohol and different reasons why they drink. And so, with this medication treatment, what I love about it is it really meets you where you're at. Like when I work with people, and what my doctor told me is like, don't try to make any changes in your drinking. Like, don't even try to reduce your drinking in the first month. Just start the medication before your usual drinking times. And as you're doing that, you're doing the behavior. For example, you had a stressful day and you take naltrexone and drink, your brain is learning that I had the trigger of stress, but I'm not quite getting the same level of reward or relief that I'm used to getting from alcohol. And when we repeatedly drink in these, familiar triggering situations, but the brain isn't getting the same level of reward that it's anticipated and that it induced the craving for, that's where the craving for alcohol starts to fade away because the brain is learning
mm.
like, hey, I had that trigger, but I didn't get the same reward. Okay, what else can I look for to kind of reward or relieve myself? And so it's this process of gradually unlearning, these drinking behaviors we have in response to different emotions, situations, life events, times of day over time, and kind of repeatedly drinking on the medicine in those settings to teach the brain that alcohol is no longer the same reward. But to your point, earlier when you were talking about like the laser acupuncture therapy, which is amazing. I don't know a ton about that, but that sounds really cool. But if the craving isn't there, the behavior can still persist. And so I work with people, sometimes they'll be like, I don't even want to drink, but I'm just doing it because it's what I do every day at 5 o'clock. And that's where kind of what we say in our program is like meeting the medicine halfway. Like the medicine is helping get rid of that desire, which makes it so much easier to be like, well, I don't feel like drinking. So what it's a million and one other things I can do tonight, and it's a process of learning these new habits, but the brain loves to learn. So if you're feeding it, different information or experiences, it will adapt those as habits as well.
Yeah, and it's not just alcohol. I mean, you look at when you wake up, when you go to bed, like
Yes.
you can get those into the same times and same, same with if you always have, a certain type of dessert before bed every time, or if you always wake up in even the bathroom,
Yeah.
go in the same time every day before work, or, same with coffee or any substance. So it's interesting that people don't, they view alcohol as something different. They don't view it as a learned behavior because they think because it has more power than just other stuff. But it's the same habit formation, it's the same body and stuff. So I think that's so interesting, like how you mentioned, even knowing the difference between the weekdays and the weekends, that's really, it just amazes me how powerful the mind is and how powerful the body is and the connection between them. And then you mentioned a program, so I want to bring up Thrive Alcohol Recovery and what you're doing with that and kind of share. I know you mentioned how long did it take you in personally, because it's kind of different for everyone, how long did it take for you to stop you drinking?
Yeah, I would actually love to kind of paint the picture of what the treatment looks like for people because it does vary person to person. And I've mentioned that it's a longer term journey. But what's really cool, and I will say, first of all, like what I have loved about the Sinclair method from day one, and I like share this passion with people I work with, is that for so long I felt like a victim to my alcohol addiction. Like my cravings and my drinking were just controlling my life. And to be honest, the notion in AA, and I know this helps people, so I don't say it to like disrespect it at all, but for me to be powerless over alcohol, which is kind of a tenet of AA, it just gave me permission to do what alcoholics do. And it kind of incentivized me to drink. Well, I can't control it, so I might as well just like go for it if I'm an
Mm,
alcoholic. So what's really cool about this treatment is almost anybody like can understand the 101 of how alcohol addiction is learned and how it can be unlearned and how the brain is such a key part of this. I think that oftentimes just gets overlooked in traditional treatment. Like we measure success by how many days someone's sober. Maybe they're not drinking on the outside, but what the heck is going on in their brain? Are they like tortured by cravings? Are they miserable inside because they want to drink and they can't? And for me, that was just like a barrier to a lot of healing. So, just to start to say, like, something that's really cool about this treatment is you understand what's going on in your brain and you realize, oh my gosh, like, I can actually unlearn this. I'm not permanently stuck. This is treatable. And, like you talked about, it's like, with the help of naltrexone, we can unlearn these drinking habits and learn other habits. Our brain and our behaviors are, we love to learn new habits to become more efficient. But so for me, I was on the treatment protocol for a year, and that's about the average time frame it takes most people to reach the end goal of this treatment, which is called pharmacological extinction of the alcohol addiction, meaning the addiction has been extinguished from the brain through pharmacology or through the medication. And when that happens, kind of the three common signs you see is that most people are spending their time like alcohol free most or all of the time without having to force it. They just genuinely don't feel like drinking anymore. If and when they do drink, they have control. They're drinking at low risk levels, 1 to 2 drinks, and they're stopping and they're no longer craving alcohol. So if they drink, it's like, I'm going out to dinner on Friday. It's an Italian dinner. I'll have a glass of wine with it. Not like, oh my gosh, I had a stressful day. I need a glass of wine. The brain has unlearned it being a compulsive behavior. And so, one key thing with this treatment is it doesn't require abstinence. Even when someone reaches extinction, if they want to keep drinking, following the protocol, they just take naltrexone beforehand. And I work with a lot of people who they've reached that extinction point. They're completely free. They don't crave it, but they drink once a week or once a month. They have a glass of champagne or wine or beer or whatever. And they stay in a place where they're drinking moderately because they continue to follow the protocol. It prevents the brain from relearning the disorder. So for me, I started it as a daily binge drinker, easily could drink a bottle of wine a night. That was me kind of like restricting myself. If I kept it to one bottle, usually I would have two, or what I did is I would
wow.
stash whiskey actually in my cabinet behind my supplements, ironically enough. And I would sneak pulls of it when my husband wasn't in the room. So I'd be drinking a glass of wine in front of him from my bottle, but then like I would pull whiskey or sometimes vodka. So that was like a daily, very binge drinking where I would like nearly black out most nights and just like wake up feeling terrible and just barely functioning. So I started the protocol, and in the first week, I had an alcohol free day, which was shocking for me because as a daily drinker, even one alcohol free day was very hard to do. But it was like, oh, I just don't feel like drinking today. And then probably about a couple weeks in, I just knew something was different because I was thinking about drinking less. I used to start thinking about drinking at 11 a.m. every day. Like, am I going to drink? I shouldn't drink. Do I have alcohol at home? Looking forward to it, romanticizing it. And I just noticed, like, oh my gosh, I'm not thinking about drinking as much. Like, my mind feels more expansive and free. I didn't realize how much I was thinking about it until that started to happen. And then as I progressed through the treatment, I started to have more consistent alcohol free days. I'd have 1 day a week. Probably within the first couple weeks on the treatment, I was consistently having one alcohol free day a week, and then it built to two and three and four. And I was drinking less when I was drinking. I could no longer finish a bottle of wine anymore. I never blacked out again from the moment I started the treatment. And by about months 4 to 6, I was probably having 3 drinking days a week, not really getting blackout, maybe drinking, a few glasses of wine, but stopping after that, and then spending the other days alcohol free. The alcohol free days just continued to build from there. And 9 months in, I was drinking about one glass of wine once a month. I'd go out to dinner and have that glass of wine, and just that would be it. I did that for a few more months, and then I ended up quitting drinking after about a year on the treatment. I tell people I quit drinking by accident because I never intended to quit drinking. Like, the last time I drank was in 2018, and it wasn't going to be my last time. I just was going to drink again. I don't know when, but then 4 months went by and I was like, I haven't drank in 4 months. Like, I just don't even want to. I wasn't trying to not drink. I just didn't. And I haven't drank since. But like, it's not something that I'm like, I can never drink again. If I wanted to drink tomorrow, I would just take naltrexone before and probably have a drink, and they would be very uneventful.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And like you said, almost strange to say that you can still drink while doing it and afterward. And so, do you know scientifically how it works? Like, how does it block the, endorphin reward cycle? And are there any, negative effects to this long or short term?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I know it is kind of like counterproductive, just to your point about being able to drink still as part of the treatment, which some people like, I definitely get pushback on that. But one of our therapists in our program, she's like, drinking isn't the problem. Excessive drinking is the problem. So
Yeah.
if someone can get to a place where they're not even getting drunk, they're having a glass of wine, it's not a huge deal. And I mean, in my view, everyone's different. But yeah, to your question
Yeah.
about how it works. So naltrexone is an opiate antagonist medication or blocker, meaning it blocks opioid receptors in the brain that are part of the reward system that would otherwise your brain produces endorphins when you drink, and those endorphins would latch on to that receptor, and that just creates that reinforcement, that learned behavior of alcohol equals reward, alcohol equals reward. You do that enough times, your brain really learns to like alcohol, and that's where the brain changes and starts to crave it more and drink more,
Right.
and the tolerance builds. So with naltrexone, it's blocking these receptors. It's kind of like a keyhole, and it's putting a key in these receptors so the endorphins aren't latching on, they're just kind of bouncing off. And so the connection of alcohol equaling a reward is starting to break. And so over time, you do the behavior and you're not getting the same reward in your brain. And so the
Right.
brain unlearns it. Long-term use of naltrexone, there's no known long-term effects from it. There's actually research that's come out recently for people who even have advanced stage liver disease. They're recommended to take naltrexone. It can be an anti-craving medication. And if they are still drinking, sadly, some people are still drinking at that stage. It can help them to perhaps drink less. Naltrexone is a non-addictive medication. Sometimes people say, oh, you're just changing one drug for another. But
Right.
naltrexone,
Right.
it's like taking a Tylenol. There's no benefit or addictive qualities to it whatsoever.
Mm.
And so
Okay.
it's really not. And what's interesting about this protocol is the longer someone's on it, the less they're taking the medication. I started as a daily drinker, so I was taking it
Right.
every day.
Right.
And 8 months in, I was taking it once a month.
Okay. It becomes almost a as necessary kind of thing.
Yep.
And I'm just curious. I'm not a drug expert by any means, but just talking about that blocking, does this work for drugs as well as alcohol? Because I know drugs and alcohol affect the body in similar ways, but also different. And I'm not sure how they're received by the body. If you could use this if you're trying to quit opioids or heroin or whatever it may be, if it blocks the same receptors or not.
Yeah, so naltrexone being an opiate antagonist, it was actually originally used for opioids because if someone is on like a daily naltrexone, for example, and they try to take opiates, what happens is they're not going to get the high. They're not going to feel
Mm.
anything from the opiates, which is something to be aware of. Like if someone's on naltrexone for alcohol and they need pain medicine because they break their arm or they're getting surgery, they will need to communicate to their doctor. There's
Okay. Yeah.
protocols that can be followed to use other pain medicines or higher doses, but originally, it was used for opioid use disorder for that reason, but it was soon after started to be researched for alcohol because alcohol operates in the same reward center. It's also been researched to help with a lot of other things, including cigarettes, cigarette addiction, marijuana use disorder, sex or porn addictions, binge eating disorders, gambling addiction. I think that's all that I am aware of. But basically, these kind of behavioral or addictive patterns operate in the same reward center in the brain. And so using
Mm.
naltrexone can help interrupt that. In fact, I have a channel on YouTube where I do success stories of people who did the treatment. And one gentleman I interviewed, he did it for his alcohol addiction, not realizing it would help him with his compulsive sex disorder. And it helped with both. And he told his testimony of that. I mean, I think that was very brave for him to admit that he had a sex addiction, but he was surprised, like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize it could help with this as well. So yeah, I think more research needs to be done because it's definitely been more research
Right.
for alcohol, but it's really exciting in the ways it can help with other things. I don't know if I mentioned binge eating disorder as well, but that's another thing.
Yeah, and in 10 years from now, as the younger generations get more addicted to doom scrolling and social media, it might have to be used before going on TikTok. So
Yeah.
we'll see how that works. I think it's definitely very interesting. And again, very surprising that it's not well known. And just again, how did you discover it?
Yeah, I learned about it through a TEDx talk, which is still on YouTube.
Oh,
Last I
okay.
checked, I think it had 5 million views. Just someone sharing their story with it. They're actually a sci-fi actress from the 80s. She's still around today, but she opened up about her addiction and she learned about this after really struggling with alcohol for a long time. So that's how I learned about it, but it's still wildly underutilized and unknown. There was a recent article that said less than 2% of people who would benefit from naltrexone are actually offered it. There's just this huge lack of awareness, lack of adoption.
Mm.
The current treatment system is really set up for like detox and then abstinence. It's not set up to
Right.
like start a treatment while you're still drinking. But the cool thing about this protocol is like you can do it from home. You can do it privately. You don't have to like uproot your life and go to rehab or anything. It can be done, yeah, from home.
And if someone wants to get it and start this, how would they go about doing that?
Yeah, so I mean, I run Thrive Alcohol Recovery, where we have a private online program centered around this treatment. We work with doctors in all 50 states who specialize in it and prescribe. And then we
Nice.
have a program that kind of walks people through the protocol. It's all private, it's all online. It can be anonymous. People can change their names if they'd like to in there. So we're definitely an option, but technically any doctor can prescribe this medication. So if someone wants to ask their doctor for it, they can. The challenges, and this happened to me and happens to a lot of people, like your general doctor is generally not aware of naltrexone and may not be comfortable prescribing it. So often people will ask their doctor and their doctor will say no, or they'll only prescribe it for a
Mm.
month, which makes no sense, or they'll prescribe it differently than the Sinclair method. But that is an option. If people have a good relationship with their doctor, they can talk to them about it. First step is getting naltrexone, but then for sure understanding the protocol and how it works and what to expect and all of that.
Right. And you talked about Thrive Alcohol Recovery being kind of a community for people who are all doing the same thing. What role would you say community plays in going through this treatment?
Yeah, I would say it's a pretty significant piece of healing. And I just say that from not only my experience, but what I hear from our members. Something that happens sometimes, I did it and I was just chatting with some of our members last night who did this as well. So when we have alcohol addiction, we're so like, we feel a lot of shame, we feel a lot of isolation. Maybe we drink alone and we just don't want to talk about this problem with people. And so sometimes people will get the medication like from their doctor, for example, and they're like, okay, I'm just going to do this by myself. And while it does work for some people, like especially if they're highly motivated and they've been working at this for a while, for other people, what I hear them say is that they just either retreat back into old patterns, they stop taking the medication, they don't know what to expect, maybe they're doing it incorrectly, or they just lose motivation for it. So like to be able to connect with others who understand what you're going through. Like one of our members last night, he was like, I love my wife. She's so supportive, but she just does not understand like my struggles with alcohol, which is true. Like if someone hasn't gone through it, they can't understand, what it's like to live with it. And so connecting with others who are in a similar boat and using the same treatment and at different stages, it's really encouraging and edifying. And just to stick with it, with it being a year-long protocol, motivation is gonna, it can come and go.
Right.
And there can be discouraging times, but for most people, like when I say a year, they're like, what's happening? It's like a weight loss journey where you see these really positive changes and that something is different. You're drinking less, you're thinking about it less, you're having alcohol-free days, you're pouring a third drink and not finishing it. Just seeing these really encouraging changes along the way so people know that something is changing, and to have coaches or peers to be able to like encourage you in that and kind of point that out for you and help you know what to expect, it can really help.
Right. And not only will motivation come and go throughout the year, but also life events happen, loss of loved ones, other stuff, maybe getting laid off from your job that can cause, people to be more tempted to drink or whatever it may be, both good and bad. And
Yeah.
so I think having accountability is so important. And like you said, people who understand. So what does everyone in your community like benefit from, not just the connection with each other, but what else do you offer?
Yeah, so we have a lot of different resources and support based on what the individual wants and where they're at. So, kind of one of the popular things we have are our group support calls, where coaches facilitate calls multiple times a week where people just check in, share where they're at, ask questions, connect with others. It's kind of a casual roundtable format, and people can just listen in or share and get support from coaches and peers. We also bring in naltrexone expert doctors and therapists and counselors to lead workshops and Q&A sessions to help people understand, the psychology and the habitual side of drinking. For example, we have one coming up later this month where a psychologist is diving into our motivation behind over drinking, like why are we drinking so much and what's the motivation there? And then we have a lot of video lessons and articles from our coaches that really just walk someone through the protocol, like what it is, how it works, how to do it correctly. And then also understanding like how your brain learns alcohol addiction, how this treatment helps it unlearn it, how you develop new habits, with the intention really that like knowledge is power and you're not a victim to your alcohol use issues. In fact, just by understanding what's going on in your brain, understanding how to change habits, you can actually completely heal from this and reverse it. And then the community is pretty active as well. We have like a private community feed where people are posting and asking questions, and coaches are sharing tips and things like that. So it's really interactive, where basically when someone joins, they can have unlimited access with a coach through private messaging. They can hop on groups. They can even get paired up with a peer, kind of like an AA sponsor, but they get one-on-one peer support with someone in our program. And not everyone uses everything. Some people just join for the videos in the community. Some people love the group. Some people do one-on-one. So it's really up to the individual, like what they feel is best for them in their journey.
Right. And we're going to have your website in the description below for everyone to check out the program, the features, the resources, to a way to contact you and all of that. Like you said, it's kind of a take what you need, and there's other stuff too if you want it. But I think like you said, that accountability, that program and being with people who know about it. So as we wrap up here, what would just be your final message to the people who are maybe struggling with alcohol and addiction, or a loved one who knows someone who is, and they're still just a little bit skeptical? What would be your final message to them?
Yeah, I want people to know that alcohol addiction can happen to anybody. Like it's just a learned behavior in your brain. And by repeatedly drinking, a lot of people develop an addiction sort of by accident. Yes, we are putting the alcohol to our mouth and drinking it, but I think a lot of people like me aren't aware just how addictive it can be, and how, two glasses of wine in the evening, no big deal, can turn into two bottles in, a pretty short amount of time. And then we're wondering, like, how the heck did we get here? And so realizing it's not a reflection of who you are as a person. Like the people I work with are amazing. They're successful. They're parents, they're business owners, they're incredible individuals, but their brain has just learned this alcohol use disorder. And I want people to know that it's quite treatable. This is not, a method I invented or that's woo woo. There's actually a lot of research studies. If you go on Google Scholar or PubMed, or even just Google the Sinclair method, it's been getting some more mention in news publications lately, like Very Well Mind or Psychology Today, or even PBS NewsHour. It's getting some attention there, which is great. But for people to know that, this is quite treatable and it can actually be reversed, and you don't have to wait for it to get to a place where it's like, oh, my life is a complete mess and I'm just a total alcoholic. And at that rock bottom moment, you can get the treatment started sooner than that. If it's mild, if you're just questioning, am I drinking too much? Or if you're drinking too much, wherever you are on the spectrum, you can start the protocol and start drinking less. And again, it's something you can do discreetly. You don't have to tell your work. I have people in our program, they haven't told anybody in their life because they've kind of kept their drinking a secret, which is a thing that some of us do with alcohol addiction. We
Right.
secretly
Yeah.
drink so people don't judge us and things like that. So just knowing that, it's treatable, you can do it discreetly, and it's not a reflection of who you are as a person. It can happen to anybody, and recognizing that when we're drinking a lot, it just does a number on our shame and our confidence and our self-worth. And please know you're not stuck there. Like, you can heal and be the best version of yourself. That sounds kind of cliche, but it's true. It really is. Alcohol takes, when we drink too much, it just takes so much from us and we kind of lose who we are. And when you heal that, it's like, wow, you rediscover who you really are underneath, the alcohol buzz.
Yeah, I think that's a great message. And my thing too for everyone is like if you've tried AA or rehab and you didn't find success, or you've tried reading books or whatever it is, you've got nothing to lose by trying this and at least giving it a chance to see. I understand it sounds too good to be true, probably. I get that. But, we're just here to help you and support you. And I think it's something great for you to try. It's never too late, and also better early than later, like you said, before life gets too bad, before that drinking develops into something worse. So even if you feel like you're struggling with just a drink a day right now, start there if you have to. Everyone's at different levels. And so definitely check out the Thrive Alcohol Recovery. We're going to have that in the description below for everyone to check out. And if you want to connect with Ms. Katie Lain even further, get more information, you can. But Ms. Lane, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing this. Like I said, I've done a lot of unique things, from the laser acupuncture to fitness to different books to different communities. But this is something truly unique, and I do hope it gets more traction. And so I hope as you continue to guest that more and more people just benefit from your work and what you do.
Yeah, it was an honor to be on. I'm really grateful. And like I said, if we can have 1,000 options, or 100 options to offer people, I think that's amazing. So thank you for spreading the word about options that are out there for people.
Sailing through the ocean blue, nuclear reactors my crew, guiding the ship, the stars as our guide, through the waves we ride, jokes and laughter fill the air. On this voyage we have to share, working together, side by side, as one family we will abide. In the heart of the ship we reside, nuclear operators with pride, powering the vessel with every stride. Our mission, a source of great pride.